6 invisible traits of women with high spiritual intelligence. A woman who knows herself is more powerful than one who knows the world. True spiritual intelligence isn't about how much you know, it's about how deeply you understand. In today's video, we'll uncover the 6 invisible traits of women with high spiritual intelligence, the quiet strengths that radiate from within and transform everything they touch. These women don't chase validation or power. They embody peace, intuition, and purpose. As you listen, reflect on your own journey. How many of these traits live within you? Which ones are waiting to awaken? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's explore together how embracing these principles can lead to profound personal growth and lasting happiness. 1. Energetic literacy, reading the invisible. Spiritually intelligent women possess what Carl Jung called a highly developed feeling function, an intuitive capacity to read the invisible dimensions of life with astonishing clarity. They sense what others cannot see, subtle shifts in energy, the truth hidden beneath words, the emotional undercurrents that flow beneath ordinary conversation. This sensitivity allows them to detect authenticity, deception, and pain without needing explanations. It is as if their spirit carries an ancient radar, tuned to the frequencies of sincerity and harmony. This gift is not something they acquired through effort or logic. It is a sacred inheritance, passed down through generations of women who have always known how to listen to the soul before the tongue. For these women, energy speaks louder than speech. They do not judge people by appearances, but by vibration, by the way someone's presence feels in their body. They can enter a room and instantly sense whether it's filled with tension or tranquility, whether someone's smile hides sadness, or whether a wordless heaviness lingers in the air. Such sensitivity, while profound, can often feel isolating. When you can see through masks, the world becomes transparent, and not everyone is comfortable with being seen. Yet it is precisely this transparency that defines their spirituality and spiritual awakening. The ability to walk through illusions and remain anchored in the truth that energy never lies. They live like barometers of harmony, constantly measuring the unseen atmosphere around them. When the energy of a place or relationship becomes discordant, their body reacts first through restlessness, fatigue, or emotional unease. This is not weakness, it is guidance. Their sensitivity alerts them when their environment or their thoughts are out of alignment with their higher self. In those moments, they retreat into silence, solitude, or nature, not to escape, but to cleanse, recalibrate, and return to their natural vibration of peace. Meditation, prayer, stillness, and grounding are not habits for them. They are survival codes, keeping their soul clear in a world that often moves too fast to feel. Their wisdom lies in discernment. They know that just because they perceive deeply does not mean they must always speak. They have learned to carry their insights with grace, to hold what they know in sacred silence until the right time reveals itself. Carl Jung said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of others." Spiritually intelligent women understand this truth intimately. They do not rush to fix others, for they recognize that transformation cannot be forced. Instead, they offer presence, compassion, and energetic steadiness, the kind that can shift a room without a single word. Their power is subtle but undeniable. It lies not in control or persuasion, but in coherence, the inner alignment between thought, emotion, and soul. When they walk into a space, the energy reorganizes itself. When they listen, others feel safe to unveil their truth. Their lives are quiet revolutions, demonstrations of how spirituality, when embodied fully, becomes a living force of healing and clarity. They teach by vibration, not by voice. Though their sensitivity can feel like a burden in a noisy world, it is actually a rare and sacred form of intelligence. To read energy is to understand life beyond appearances, to see through illusion into essence. Spiritually intelligent women embody this truth with every breath they take, turning sensitivity into strength and solitude into illumination. They are the living instruments of balance and beauty, constantly tuning themselves to the divine frequency where authenticity, peace, and wisdom converge. 2. Open channel to the collective unconscious. Women with high spiritual intelligence possess an extraordinary ability to remain open channels to the collective unconscious, a vast realm of hidden wisdom that connects every soul beyond time and form. Guided by dreams, symbols, and synchronicities, they move through life as if following a secret rhythm only their soul can hear. Every sign, every coincidence, every whisper from the unseen carries meaning for them. They understand that reality is not random, but symbolic. And through this awareness, they bridge spirituality and daily living in the most graceful way. Their intuition allows them to recognize divine timing, knowing instinctively when to wait and when to act, when to release and when to receive. These women do not force life. They flow with it. They trust that the unseen hand of the divine is always orchestrating events perfectly. A recurring dream might reveal hidden truth. A feather on the ground might remind them of protection. A song that plays at the right moment might answer a question they silently carried. Through such experiences, they learn to translate invisible wisdom into conscious understanding, turning abstract signs into grounded insight. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." These women have made the unconscious their companion. They walk through the world aware that what seems like chance is often a message from the soul, a reflection from the deeper dimension of life, guiding them toward alignment. Their spirituality is not distant or ceremonial. It is alive, breathing in the moments of stillness and silence. You can feel it when they speak, because their words come from a deep inner knowing rather than emotion or reaction. They embody a calm presence, one that resonates with peace and grounded strength. Their spiritual development has refined their sensitivity, allowing them to feel the emotional undercurrents around them and respond with empathy instead of judgment. They see beyond appearances, sensing the energy and truth within people and situations. This ability does not make them superior. It makes them humble, aware that everyone is connected through the same divine intelligence that whispers beneath the noise of the world. Such women often serve as healers, teachers, or silent guides for those who have forgotten how to listen to their own inner voice. They live in service to truth, helping others awaken by translating the invisible language of the soul into something the mind can understand. They teach that spirituality is not an escape from the world, but a way of seeing it clearly through love, intuition, and higher awareness. To them, the world is a sacred mirror reflecting what lies within, and by interpreting its patterns, they uncover purpose and clarity in every experience. Their lives reveal that the divine speaks constantly, not through thunder, but through subtle signs, through moments of stillness, and through the quiet pulse of intuition that links us all. Through their example, we learn that true spiritual development begins when we trust the unseen, when we stop demanding proof and start perceiving meaning. Life becomes richer, softer, and more guided. The more we open our awareness, the more the universe responds. To walk in this way is to remember that spirituality is not a path outside of us, but a deep awakening within us. One where dreams, symbols, and synchronicities are no longer coincidences, but sacred messages reminding us that we are never alone in the journey of the soul. 3. Cultivation of sacred solitude. They see solitude not as loneliness, but as a sacred encounter with their own soul. In silence, they don't escape the world, they return to themselves. As Carl Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." Through solitude, they awaken to the truth of their being, finding in the quiet a mirror for their spirit and a gateway to higher understanding. Their alone time is not an absence of connection, but a deeper communion with the universe within. Solitude becomes their spiritual sanctuary, where the noise of the world fades and the voice of intuition rises like music from the depths of the heart. In this sacred stillness, reflection transforms into revelation. They sit with their thoughts not to judge them, but to understand their origins, to see how emotion, memory, and energy intertwine. Here, solitude becomes a spiritual laboratory, a place where they experiment with stillness, observe their inner patterns, and turn pain into wisdom. They withdraw, not to isolate, but to purify, to release what no longer serves their evolution, and protect their authenticity from the chaos of external influence. They know that every time they choose solitude consciously, they preserve their energy, recharge their light, and return to the world with renewed clarity and calm strength. These women embody spiritual wisdom in motion. They understand that silence is not emptiness, but fullness waiting to be felt. When they close the door to the world, they open the door to divine guidance. In the still moments of their lives, they nurture creativity, intuition, and grace. Their solitude teaches them discernment, how to distinguish between the voice of fear and the whisper of the soul. They emerge from this inner space not detached, but grounded, not distant, but luminous, carrying a peace that cannot be shaken by circumstance. For them, solitude is sacred practice, the purest form of alignment, where truth, serenity, and self-awareness merge into one harmonious rhythm of being. 4. Alchemizing suffering into wisdom. Their pain becomes the sacred fire through which their soul refines itself, turning every wound into a form of spiritual gold. These women embody what Carl Jung called the transcendent function, the mysterious bridge between shadow and light, where suffering is not erased, but transformed into deep wisdom. They no longer see pain as punishment, but as initiation, a sacred teacher that shapes their compassion and clarity. Through this inner alchemy, they transmute heartbreak into healing, fear into faith, and sorrow into empathy. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And they live this truth every day, embracing both the darkness and the light, knowing that spiritual awakening is born not from escape, but from integration. They walk through their shadows with courage, refusing to numb or suppress what hurts. Instead, they sit with their wounds, breathe into their grief, and allow the hidden wisdom within to reveal itself. In doing so, they embody the archetype of the wounded healer, those who have been burned by life yet emerge as medicine for others. Their experiences become living scriptures of the soul. They understand that healing is not about pretending the past never happened, but about transforming the meaning of it. Their pain becomes the soil where compassion grows, their tears the water that nourishes their strength. What once shattered them becomes their anchor, their center, their quiet power. And in this transformation, something miraculous occurs. They stop identifying with their suffering and begin identifying with their consciousness. They learn that spirituality is not about avoiding pain, but about seeing through it, realizing that even the darkest moments carry divine intelligence. Through reflection and surrender, they uncover a profound truth. The soul does not evolve through comfort, but through contrast. Each hardship becomes a mirror reflecting their hidden resilience. Each loss reveals another layer of love. What once felt like punishment becomes participation in the great work of awakening. These women no longer rush to fix others because they have learned that true healing arises from presence, not rescue. Their energy radiates calm and depth because they have faced the storm within themselves and found stillness there. As Rumi wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." They live by that wisdom, turning their inner fractures into windows of illumination. Every scar becomes a map, every silence a sermon. They teach without words, reminding others that every soul has the power to alchemize its own pain into light. Through the union of shadow and grace, they embody the essence of Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom, the understanding that enlightenment is not the denial of suffering, but the transformation of it. Their journey is not one of perfection, but of wholeness. They show that when you stop running from your pain and allow it to be your teacher, it no longer defines you, it refines you. This is the invisible trait of women with high spiritual intelligence, the ability to turn the lead of suffering into the gold of awareness, to transform wounds into wisdom, and to walk this world as living testaments of what it truly means to awaken. 5. Mastery of therapeutic presence. Their energy itself heals because it flows from deep awareness rather than effort, radiating calm and clarity that reach beyond words. In their presence, you feel something shift inside you. Your breathing slows, your mind softens, and your spirit remembers peace. They do not need to preach or explain, for their silence communicates more profoundly than speech ever could. This kind of presence is rare. It is born from a woman who has done the inner work of grounding herself in stillness, of mastering her emotions instead of being mastered by them, and of aligning her life with the essence of spirituality and spiritual development. She does not absorb chaos or mirror others' instability. Instead, she becomes a mirror of peace, reflecting what is possible when consciousness replaces reaction. Every gesture, every pause, every word she chooses carries intention and grace. She has learned that power does not always roar. It often whispers through serenity, through the unshakable calm that steadies others without commanding them. She embodies wisdom in action, understanding that healing does not happen through control, but through resonance. When she speaks, her words are deliberate, measured like sacred offerings. because she knows energy moves through language, shaping emotions and realities. She does not waste words trying to convince or correct. She allows truth to settle naturally in silence, where it grows stronger. Her restraint is not detachment, but mastery, an art of preserving energy for what truly matters. Through this mastery, she becomes a living reminder that stillness is not emptiness, but full presence of an energy field so coherent it reorganizes chaos around it. People are drawn to her not because she gives answers, but because they feel seen without needing to explain, healed without being told what is wrong. She understands that every human soul yearns to be met in presence, not in performance. Behind this invisible strength lies years of spiritual development, self-reflection, meditation, prayer, and choosing awareness over impulse again and again. She has faced her shadows, integrated her pain, and learned that real spirituality is not an escape from the human experience, but full acceptance of it. Her peace was earned through inner storms, and that is why her calm is contagious. It carries truth. She offers no empty positivity, only grounded compassion that meets others where they are and gently lifts them higher. Through her example, she teaches that to heal others, one must first become whole within, for only then can your energy become medicine. The message is simple yet profound. You do not need to speak loudly to be powerful. Power is presence. Healing is energy alignment. And peace is the ultimate form of strength. To cultivate this presence in your own life, slow down before reacting, breathe before responding, and ask yourself what energy you are contributing to the moment. When you choose awareness over chaos, patience over urgency, stillness over noise, your own energy begins to harmonize with truth. That is the essence of spirituality and spiritual development, to become so deeply anchored in your inner light that simply by existing, you help others remember their own. 6. Natural magnetism for sacred encounters. They carry an invisible magnetism, a silent gravitational pull that draws the right people, opportunities, and divine encounters into their orbit. Life seems to whisper to them through signs, patterns, and coincidences that others might dismiss as random, but they sense the hidden order beneath it all, the sacred rhythm that Carl Jung called synchronicity. In the realm of spiritual wisdom, nothing happens by chance. Every meeting, every delay, every repeated number or familiar face appears as part of a greater dialogue between the soul and the universe. Yet, those with high spiritual intelligence understand that not every sign is guidance and not every impulse is divine. Discernment becomes their greatest protection. They learn to distinguish the still, humble voice of the soul from the seductive whisper of ego. True guidance feels calm, clear, and grounded, while ego-driven illusion often feels urgent, dramatic, and self-centered. Their authentic alignment is their secret power. Without effort or intention, they radiate an unseen light that others can feel. People are drawn to their peace, their presence, and their quiet confidence. They inspire transformation, not by preaching, but by being. Their energy speaks louder than words. It mirrors back to others their own potential for healing and growth. Wherever they go, they bring a sense of calm to chaos, depth to superficiality, and meaning to the mundane. This magnetism is not learned through strategy, but born from living in truth. When your heart and mind move in harmony with your soul, you naturally become a vessel through which synchronicity flows. Carl Jung once said, Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Women with high spiritual intelligence have learned to make the unconscious conscious. They do not chase destiny. They cooperate with it. They listen to their intuition without letting fantasy cloud reason. When coincidences appear, they don't rush. They pause, breathe, and ask, is this from love or from fear? That single question anchors them in awareness. They test each moment by its fruit, whether it brings clarity or confusion, peace or anxiety, expansion or contraction. Through such honesty, they refine their internal compass until it aligns with divine timing. This sacred magnetism deepens with authenticity. The more real you are, the more resonance you create. The more grounded you become, the more the universe trusts you with meaningful encounters. Energy recognizes energy, and like attracts like. Every aligned choice strengthens the invisible field around you, turning your life into a living prayer, a bridge between the seen and unseen. Such women remind us that true attraction is not about appearance or charm, but coherence, the alignment between your words, actions, and intentions. They don't manipulate outcomes. They magnetize them through wholeness. In their presence, others feel understood without words, healed without explanation, guided without force. They live as quiet examples of what happens when the human heart works in partnership with divine intelligence. Their journey is not about control, but surrender, not about manifesting endlessly, but about trusting deeply. And through that trust, their lives unfold in harmony with a greater pattern, a sacred choreography of soul and cosmos that speaks the language of synchronicity and love. We hope this deep dive into the 6 invisible traits of women with high spiritual intelligence has awakened something within you. If you're ready to embody this spiritual wisdom and rise into your most authentic, conscious self, comment, "I am awakened," below. Your engagement helps us share more insights from Carl Jung and create content that nurtures your inner growth and transformation. True spiritual intelligence isn't about appearances. It's about the quiet strength, wisdom, and grace that flow from within. When a woman embodies self-awareness, compassion, and inner peace, she becomes a light to everyone around her. Remember, these 6 invisible traits aren't meant to be achieved overnight. They're qualities to nurture through mindfulness, reflection, and love. If this message resonates with you, let it inspire your journey of growth and authenticity. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming videos on spirituality, transformation, and the deeper truths of the soul. Carl Jung's warning: when the empath finally sees the family narcissism trap, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Many empaths spend years trapped in a web of guilt, obligation, and emotional manipulation, often within their own families, before realizing the truth. Love without boundaries is not love. It's self-betrayal. In today's episode on Spiritual Wisdom, we'll explore Carl Jung's profound warning about the family narcissism trap and how awakening to it is the first step toward emotional freedom and spiritual growth. Have you ever felt like the peacekeeper in your family, absorbing everyone's pain but never being seen for your own? Share your experience in the comments below. and let's begin this journey toward clarity, healing, and true self-empowerment together. 1. The awakening and the family illusion. The empath's true spiritual awakening begins in a moment of quiet realization, the moment they see that the love they grew up with was not love at all, but a subtle form of control. In families ruled by emotional manipulation, affection becomes currency and belonging becomes a contract. The home, which Carl Jung described as the first symbolic God a child encounters, teaches the empath early on that love must be earned through silence, compliance, and invisibility. To belong, they must disappear. To be accepted, they must abandon their true self. And so, the empath learns to read the room instead of reading their own heart, to carry the emotions of others while neglecting their own. But every illusion eventually cracks. One day, the empath's inner self whispers the forbidden truth. Love should not hurt, and compassion should not cost your soul. This is where the spiritual awakening begins, not in a temple or a sacred book, but in the heartbreak of seeing one's family through unfiltered eyes. The empath realizes that what they called family loyalty was emotional bondage, that guilt was a tool used to maintain control, and that their constant self-sacrifice only served to feed the narcissistic system. They see how the family's false version of love demanded obedience, not honesty, and submission, not sincerity. Carl Jung warned that what is not made conscious will repeat as fate. The empath now sees that their pain was inherited, that they were trained to keep the family's secrets, to absorb shame that was never theirs, and to mediate chaos that existed long before their birth. This recognition is painful, but liberating. It reveals how deeply generational patterns of narcissism and emotional dependency run. The empath starts asking new questions. Why do I always feel responsible for everyone's happiness? Why does peace feel like danger? These questions awaken the soul from its programmed trance. This stage of awakening is not glamorous. It's raw and disorienting. The empath begins to detach, to say no, to step back. Every boundary feels like betrayal because the family taught them that love equals sacrifice. Yet slowly, they learn that saying no is not rejection, it is protection. That choosing peace is not selfish, it is sacred. True spirituality is not an escape from pain, but the courage to face it, to descend into the unconscious and reclaim what was lost there: self-respect, authenticity, and freedom. The empath begins to rebuild from within. They create a new kind of home, one not defined by fear or obligation, but by truth and inner alignment. They learn that compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction, and that genuine love never requires you to disappear. Through awareness, they stop overgiving and start existing fully. They no longer seek validation from those who cannot see them. Instead, they find power in solitude, clarity in silence, and divinity in self-acceptance. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The empath who awakens becomes that living truth. No longer trapped in the family's illusion, they embody the rare balance between heart and discernment, softness and strength. This is the real essence of spiritual awakening: seeing the illusion clearly, forgiving it, and walking free. It is where suffering turns to wisdom, and love finally returns to its purest form. The love that begins within. Comment below. I choose truth over illusion. If you're ready to awaken from the family trap, and embrace your spiritual clarity. 2. The birth of the empath and the cycle of control. Empaths often emerge from emotional storms rather than calm skies. Their deep sensitivity is not accidental. It is the result of adapting to a chaotic environment where emotional survival depends on intuition. Growing up around unpredictable moods, criticism, or cold detachment forces the empath to develop an almost psychic ability to sense shifts in energy. They learn to stay silent when tension rises, to soothe others before conflict erupts, and to measure their worth by how well they can maintain peace. What begins as a defense mechanism becomes an identity. As Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Yet for many empaths, their path of spirituality and spiritual development begins with realizing they've been living as someone everyone else needed them to be. In families where love is conditional, empathy becomes a transaction. The child unconsciously believes that being good, helpful, and understanding will guarantee affection and safety. This creates a hidden belief system, a psychic contract that says, if I suffer enough, if I heal others enough, I will finally be loved. The empath grows up believing that love must be earned through self-sacrifice. This illusion becomes the root of a painful cycle. They feel responsible for other people's emotions and equate healing others with proving their own worth. In narcissistic family systems, this becomes the perfect setup for control. The narcissistic parent feeds on attention and validation, while subtly teaching the empath that their needs don't matter. The empath becomes the caretaker, the fixer, and the emotional anchor in a sea of manipulation, confusing guilt with love and loyalty with bondage. As this pattern extends into adulthood, empaths often attract partners and friends who mirror their original wound. They are drawn to familiar pain, those who are charming yet emotionally unavailable, demanding yet fragile. Something deep within them whispers that if they can just love harder, be more patient, more forgiving, then this time it will work. This time, love will stay. But this is the illusion of the empath's heart, the belief that love can heal someone who refuses to confront their own shadow. Carl Jung warned that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The empath, until awakened, keeps repeating the same emotional story under the name of compassion. Then comes the breaking point, the sacred moment of awakening. It's when exhaustion replaces empathy, when silence becomes heavier than words, and when the empath finally realizes that no amount of love can fill a void someone chooses to keep. This is the beginning of spiritual clarity, the understanding that compassion without boundaries is not love, but self-erasure. Spirituality teaches that to awaken is to see truth without distortion. And one of the hardest truths is that you cannot save those who use your empathy as fuel for their ego. The empath's healing begins when they stop pouring into emptiness and start nurturing their own light. What once felt like abandonment now becomes alignment. The focus shifts from fixing others to freeing oneself. Through this transformation, empathy evolves into power. Sensitivity becomes discernment. The heart that once bled for others learns to beat for itself. This is the essence of spiritual development learning, that love is not measured by suffering, but by authenticity. When you say no without guilt, when you walk away without anger, when you choose peace over chaos, you honor both your soul and your purpose. The empath's journey is not to carry the pain of others, but to become an example of healed energy, one who no longer mistakes pain for connection or control for love. And in that awareness, the empath finally breaks the cycle, transforming inherited wounds into wisdom and finding that the true act of love was never about saving others. It was about saving themselves. 3. The narcissistic family system. In a narcissistic family system, Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom unveils a dark yet illuminating truth about how dysfunction shapes identity and emotion. One parent becomes the wounded tyrant demanding control, validation, and emotional obedience to mask their own insecurity. The other turns into the enabler, choosing silence and denial over confrontation, pretending that peace exists, when in reality, it is built on fear. The children, unknowingly trapped in this web, assume rigid roles. The golden child shines to earn love, the scapegoat absorbs the blame to maintain balance, and the empath becomes the healer, the emotional sponge who carries everyone's unspoken pain. The empath's compassion, once a divine gift, turns into a survival mechanism. They confuse servitude with love, exhaustion with loyalty, and people-pleasing with peace. They grow up believing that their worth depends on how well they can fix, soothe, and save others, never realizing that this love is conditional, manipulated, and used to sustain the family illusion. As years pass, the empath starts to awaken a painful, sacred process that Carl Jung called individuation, the journey toward one's true self. This awakening begins when the empath finally sees the trap, that love was never meant to be earned through suffering. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." For the empath, this means recognizing that the constant pull to rescue others was not compassion, but conditioning. It was a pattern inherited from generations of emotional pain disguised as duty. Through spiritual wisdom, they realize that compassion without boundaries is self-betrayal, and silence in the face of dysfunction is not kindness. It is fear wearing a mask of peace. The empath's healing comes when they stop internalizing other people's chaos and begin to honor their own peace. They understand that not every cry for help deserves a response, and not every wound is theirs to heal. As Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. This pain is the fire that forges self-awareness, teaching the empath that love without self-respect is just another form of imprisonment. They learn to set boundaries without guilt, to say no without apology, and to detach from those who drain their light. What once felt like betrayal now becomes liberation, the sacred act of choosing themselves. This transformation is not cold or selfish. It is spiritual maturity. It is the realization that true empathy does not mean absorbing another's suffering, but reflecting it back with clarity and truth. In this awakening, the empath's sensitivity evolves into discernment. Their compassion becomes conscious rather than compulsive. They no longer confuse emotional dependency for intimacy or mistake chaos for connection. They begin to see the family not through the lens of obligation, but through understanding, realizing that every role, from tyrant to scapegoat, was born of pain. But while they can forgive, they also learn that forgiveness does not mean returning to dysfunction. Healing may not mean reconciliation. It may simply mean release. The empath reclaims their voice, their boundaries, and their light. They finally understand that protecting their energy is not rejection. It is love in its highest form. And through this profound journey of spiritual wisdom and self-realization, they embody Carl Jung's truth. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. Do you feel this truth within your soul? Comment below. I see through the illusion. I awaken now. 4. Awakening through individuation. True awakening happens when the empath finally stops performing for love and begins the sacred process of individuation, the separation from the family myth that once defined their identity. This myth is built on silent rules and emotional contracts where the empath learns that love is earned through compliance, emotional caretaking, and endless giving. In this illusion, the empath becomes the family's anchor, absorbing pain, maintaining peace, and hiding their own truth to keep others comfortable. But as the light of awareness begins to rise, something deep within the empath starts to rebel. They begin to see that the constant need to fix, please, or save others is not love. It is emotional bondage disguised as virtue. What feels like loyalty to the family is often a betrayal of the self, and when that realization dawns, it marks the beginning of true spirituality and spiritual awakening. The process of individuation feels like betrayal because it dismantles the false self, the persona created to survive emotional manipulation and conditional affection. When the empath starts reclaiming their boundaries, when they stop absorbing others' chaos, they encounter a wave of guilt that feels unbearable. This guilt, however, is not a sign of wrongdoing. It is the death cry of the false identity. It is the residue of old programming, proof that the empath is finally stepping out of emotional servitude and into authenticity. Carl Jung called this process the confrontation with the shadow, the awakening of the unconscious into light. The empath, once trained to suppress anger and sadness, begins to see these emotions as sacred messengers of balance rather than flaws to be hidden. Saying no becomes an act of divine reclamation, a statement that love does not require self-betrayal. As the empath awakens, the emotional architecture of their life begins to shift. The old roles, the healer, the forgiver, the peacekeeper, begin to dissolve. There is grief, because each role carried a sense of belonging. Yet, in that grief, the empath begins to glimpse a deeper truth. Love that demands the death of the self is not love, but control. The pain of separation becomes the bridge to freedom. What once felt like abandonment now feels like alignment. This is the quiet revolution of the soul that Jung spoke of, the movement from persona to self, from illusion to truth. Through this sacred unraveling, the empath learns that healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it means walking away with peace in your heart and clarity in your eyes. The deeper the empath surrenders to this spiritual awakening, the more they realize that guilt and loneliness are temporary visitors, guiding them toward authenticity. What feels like death is actually resurrection, the rebirth of the true self after years of suppression. In this rebirth, spirituality becomes an embodied experience, not an idea. The empath begins to see life through the eyes of consciousness rather than fear. The approval they once craved loses its power, and the presence they radiate begins to speak louder than any apology ever could. They discover that real love does not demand sacrifice of the soul, but invites truth to blossom. Through individuation, the empath rises as a whole being, balanced, awakened, and free, no longer trapped in the family's narrative, but finally living as the author of their own. 5. The mirror of narcissism. Carl Jung revealed a profound truth. Narcissism and empathy are two faces of the same archetype, both born from the same wound, but expressed in opposite ways. The narcissist hides from tenderness, afraid that vulnerability will expose weakness, while the empath hides from power, afraid that strength will make them unworthy of love. This dynamic creates a mirror. One reflects domination, the other submission, and both are trapped in unconscious patterns of survival. Within a narcissistic family, the empath becomes the caretaker, believing peace depends on their ability to absorb pain, to stay quiet, to be good. They grow up equating love with exhaustion, thinking harmony means losing themselves. Yet as Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. True spirituality and spiritual development begin the moment the empath dares to look into this mirror and realizes that rescuing others is not love. It is self-abandonment disguised as compassion. When you finally wake up to this truth, it shakes the foundation of your identity. You start to see that the love you offered so freely was often a plea for acceptance, that your empathy became a shield protecting you from rejection. Jung's teaching on individuation reminds us that healing demands integration, uniting tenderness with strength, compassion with boundaries, love with truth. This integration is not about becoming harder. It is about becoming whole. When you reclaim your right to say no, when you stop apologizing for existing, the mirror of narcissism begins to shatter. The reflection that once defined you no longer holds power, and in its place arises a new image, one rooted in self-respect, awareness, and emotional sovereignty. The process is not painless. It feels like rebellion, like betraying everything you were taught to believe about love and family. You might feel guilt for standing up, shame for wanting peace that doesn't require your suffering. But this discomfort is sacred. It marks the end of illusion and the beginning of truth. Spiritual wisdom teaches that light is meaningless without shadow, and love is incomplete without power. The empath's anger, long suppressed, becomes the fire that purifies their spirit. Their voice, once silenced, becomes the sound of awakening. As your spiritual development unfolds, you begin to understand that love rooted in self-erasure is not love, it's bondage. And the moment you honor your boundaries, you set both yourself and others free. Jung warned that the empath's greatest challenge is to stop trying to heal those who refuse to heal themselves. The true act of love is not saving the narcissist, but saving yourself from their gravitational pull. When you no longer seek validation from pain, you transcend the cycle of emotional codependency. You start attracting people who see your worth instead of those who feed on your guilt. You begin to embody balanced energy where compassion flows without depletion and power stands without cruelty. This is what spirituality truly is, not escaping the world, but standing in it with clarity, strength, and grace. The mirror of narcissism, once a source of confusion, becomes a sacred teacher. It shows you how love twisted by fear leads to suffering, and how self-awareness transforms that suffering into wisdom. The empath's journey is not about choosing between love and strength. It's about realizing they were never separate. Power guided by empathy becomes presence. Empathy strengthened by power becomes truth. And from that unity, a new form of love is born. One that no longer asks, "Am I enough?" but simply radiates, "I am." Don't forget to subscribe for more spiritual wisdom on how to recognize the mirror of narcissism and reclaim your true power as an empath. Stay tuned. Your awakening has only just begun. 6. Descent into the shadow and rebirth. When the empath begins the descent into their own unconscious, they enter what Carl Jung described as the dark night of the soul, a sacred initiation where spiritual wisdom is forged through suffering, self-confrontation, and truth. This is not a fall into despair, but a return to authenticity. Here, the empath comes face to face with the emotions they were taught to suppress: anger, jealousy, grief, and resentment. They begin to understand that these feelings are not moral failings, but exiled parts of the psyche that have been silenced to maintain harmony in a dysfunctional system. As Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. In this process, the empath begins to reclaim their own power, realizing that what they once viewed as darkness was simply unlived life waiting to be acknowledged. As the empath journeys deeper, they begin to see that their sensitivity has always been their mirror, reflecting not only the emotions of others, but their own buried truths. The family narcissism trap depends on the empath's denial of their pain, keeping them stuck in cycles of guilt, compliance, and over-responsibility. When they begin to look within, instead of fixing those around them, they see how much of their love was shaped by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of not being enough. Yet it is through this awareness that the empath awakens to spiritual wisdom. The understanding that love without boundaries is self-abandonment. They start to realize that true compassion is not the endless giving of oneself, but the courage to honor one's soul. Carl Jung believed that what you resist not only persists, but grows in size. The empath learns this truth intimately as they stop resisting their shadow. They learn that anger is not evil. It is a signal that a boundary has been crossed. Jealousy reveals a hidden longing for recognition. Grief uncovers a love that was never properly expressed. Each emotion, once feared, becomes a key, unlocking a deeper layer of consciousness. This is the moment of inner alchemy when pain transforms into wisdom, chaos becomes clarity, and the empath evolves from a wounded caretaker into an aware creator. Through this transformation, the empath no longer mirrors others' dysfunction, but radiates authenticity and spiritual strength. As the light returns, the empath realizes that they were never broken, only fragmented. They integrate what was once exiled and reclaim the fullness of their being. This is what Jung called individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole by uniting the conscious and the unconscious. It is not about perfection, but balance, not about pleasing others, but embodying truth. When the empath rises from the underworld of their own psyche, they no longer mistake peace for silence or love for sacrifice. They no longer feel compelled to heal everyone. Instead, they live in a way that naturally brings healing through presence, not performance. In this rebirth, the empath becomes what Jung described as the self, the harmony of opposites, the balance of shadow and light. They understand that the darkness they once feared was never meant to destroy them, but to show them where they had hidden their light. The journey through the dark night is the initiation where every awakened soul must face the sacred turning point where one learns that the shadow is not the enemy, but the teacher. This is true spiritual wisdom. The realization that healing does not mean becoming pure, but becoming whole. and that by embracing the darkness within, you illuminate the world without. 7. Transformation and liberation. When the empath stops absorbing the chaos of others and turns inward, something within them begins to shift, a quiet revolution of the soul that transforms empathy into spiritual wisdom. What once felt like an endless battle to rescue, fix, and heal becomes a sacred process of remembering. They begin to understand that true healing does not come from sacrifice, but from presence. As Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And it is through this awakening that empathy matures into clarity, peace, and quiet strength. No longer ruled by emotional storms, the empath learns that love doesn't require self-abandonment, and compassion doesn't mean absorbing another's suffering. It means standing in calm awareness and allowing your stillness to guide others toward their own healing. At this stage of spiritual awakening, the empath realizes that their sensitivity is not a curse, but a compass. Every emotion they once carried from others becomes a mirror, revealing what needed balance within themselves. They begin to see how constantly taking responsibility for others' pain created a spiritual imbalance, one that drained their life force and clouded their intuition. But through this inner reflection, they discover that empathy is not about drowning in someone else's sorrow. It's about holding steady in the presence of it. This is where compassion transforms into power. When they stop trying to rescue others from their storms, they realize they can calm those storms simply by not being pulled into them. As awareness deepens, the empath begins to see through the illusions that once trapped them. They recognize the invisible patterns of control, manipulation, and guilt that often exist in family systems, especially when narcissistic dynamics are at play. Jung warned that the unconscious family patterns often repeat across generations until someone becomes conscious enough to break them. The empath becomes that person, the awakener. They see how they were conditioned to be the peacemaker, the emotional sponge, the one who absorbs pain to keep the family harmony intact. But now they understand that harmony built on self-erasure is not peace, it's bondage. True peace can only emerge when each soul takes ownership of its own energy. So, the empath withdraws not with anger, but with clarity. They step out of the dance, refusing to mirror dysfunction any longer, and in doing so, they shatter the illusion of control. This stage of transformation brings a calm detachment that is often misunderstood. It's not that the empath stops caring, it's that they start caring more intelligently. They learn to distinguish between compassion and codependency, between love and enmeshment. They begin to honor their boundaries as sacred spiritual gates that protect the purity of their energy. In this space, they find emotional neutrality, not coldness, but peace. They are no longer triggered by chaos because they see it as a projection of others' unhealed pain, not a reflection of their worth. In this neutrality, they reclaim their inner authority and radiate a quiet confidence that others can feel but cannot easily manipulate. Through this process, empathy becomes a higher frequency of consciousness. The empath now walks as both healer and witness, no longer lost in the suffering of others, but anchored in their own divine center. They embody what Carl Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating both light and shadow. They no longer fear their sensitivity. They honor it as their superpower. Their peace becomes their protection. Their detachment becomes their strength. and their presence becomes the silent sermon that awakens others. This is the moment when the empath transcends the family narcissism trap, not by fighting it, but by outgrowing it, by choosing awareness over reaction, sovereignty over sacrifice, and truth over illusion. In this state of spiritual awakening, empathy ceases to be suffering. It becomes liberation itself. If this message resonates with your soul and you're ready for your own transformation, say it with faith. I am free. I am healed. I am stepping into my spiritual liberation today. 8. The role of forgiveness and freedom. Forgiveness is not an act of submission, but one of profound liberation. It is the moment the empath chooses to step off the karmic wheel of endless reaction, to stop repeating the emotional patterns inherited from generations of pain. Forgiveness, in the truest spiritual sense, is not about excusing or forgetting what happened. It is about reclaiming your power. When you forgive, you free yourself from being the actor trapped in your family's ongoing drama and become the playwright who writes a new story rooted in awareness, peace, and self-mastery. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Forgiveness is how we make the unconscious conscious. It is how we transform the unseen pain into wisdom and refuse to let our past continue shaping our present. When you finally see that the people who hurt you were often driven by their own unhealed wounds, you stop internalizing their cruelty as your burden to carry. This is not about condoning their behavior. It is about breaking the energetic tie that keeps your spirit bound to cycles of suffering. Through the lens of spirituality and spiritual development, forgiveness becomes the sacred key that unlocks your heart from resentment and opens the door to freedom. Resentment is a form of bondage. It drains your energy, anchors you to the past, and prevents your light from expanding. Every time you forgive, you retrieve a lost part of yourself, a fragment of soul energy that was entangled in someone else's story. This act of release raises your vibration, moving you toward what Jung described as individuation, the process of becoming whole. You are no longer a divided being, craving love from those incapable of giving it. You are now someone who recognizes that your worth was never dependent on another's perception. Forgiveness becomes the bridge between pain and awakening, between the ego's need for justice and the soul's desire for peace. The empath's path to forgiveness is not a single act, but a series of awakenings. Each time you forgive, you dissolve another layer of inherited pain. It takes immense courage to look at your wounds with compassion rather than self-pity, to say with conviction, "The cycle ends with me." It is not weakness, it is emotional mastery. It is the moment your soul declares independence from the stories that once defined you. Forgiveness is what transforms pain into purpose and sorrow into strength. Through this inner alchemy, you learn that true freedom is not found in changing others, but in releasing your need for them to change. Freedom comes when you no longer feel obligated to carry what was never yours. You stop trying to fix those who refuse to heal themselves. You stop defining your identity through the lens of another's dysfunction. You release your need for external validation and realize that peace is an inside job. This is the essence of spiritual development, transcending the illusion of control, letting go with grace, and choosing to live in alignment with your higher truth. When you forgive, You rise beyond the drama of the past and reclaim your divine right to serenity. Forgiveness, then, is the highest expression of love, not for those who wronged you, but for yourself. It allows you to end the karmic play where pain once had the leading role. You stop being a character in a story written by unconscious minds and begin writing a narrative of conscious freedom. It is the sacred art of letting go. The moment the empath no longer seeks justice and suffering, but finds redemption and peace. Through forgiveness, you step fully into your power, embodying the truth that liberation begins the moment you stop reacting and start awakening. 9. Spiritual maturity and universal healing. Your personal healing is not only about you, it's about transforming the emotional DNA of your entire lineage. As Carl Jung taught through his timeless spiritual wisdom, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Every moment you bring awareness to your wounds, every time you choose truth over denial, you are freeing generations that came before you. Pain that once passed silently from parent to child becomes light in your hands. This is what it means to participate in universal healing, the empath's evolution from emotional survival to spiritual awakening. You are not merely recovering from your story. You are rewriting the collective script of your family's soul. Through this awakening, empathy matures into spiritual vision. You begin to see the divine in yourself and others, but this time, without losing your boundaries. You no longer confuse compassion with self-sacrifice. You no longer carry the pain that doesn't belong to you. Instead, you transmute it through consciousness. Each act of awareness becomes an offering, transforming darkness into understanding and suffering into sacred wisdom. You realize that true empathy is not about absorbing pain. It's about witnessing it with presence and love. As you do, your inner light grows stronger, guiding you toward authenticity, peace, and inner freedom. When you no longer seek approval from those who cannot see your soul, you step into individuation at the core of Jung's teaching. You stop rescuing others and start respecting yourself. You release the need to fix what is unwilling to heal. You learn that love is not endless giving. It is balance, reciprocity, and awareness. This realization is liberation itself. It is the turning point where you stop performing the role of the wounded empath and become the conscious creator of your reality. You begin to love differently, without control, without expectation, without losing your center. Your family becomes a sacred mirror, reflecting what your soul needs to see in order to grow. Some reflect pain, others clarity, and a few reveal the shadow you've been avoiding. But when you stop reacting and start observing, wisdom arises. You see that forgiveness isn't about inviting people back into your life. It's about freeing yourself from their hold. You no longer fight for validation. You embody it. Each emotional boundary you set is an act of divine self-respect, a declaration that your peace is holy. Spiritual maturity is when you can witness chaos without absorbing it, when you can feel deeply without losing yourself, and when you can love without abandoning your truth. This is the true meaning of spiritual awakening, not an escape from pain, but the mastery of it. When you embody awareness, your very presence becomes healing. You are no longer defined by the wounds of your past, but by the light you bring to them. And every conscious breath, every moment of clarity, every act of self-love sends ripples through the collective heart of humanity. reminding the world that healing is contagious, and love, when awakened, is the highest form of power. Leave a like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and make sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss powerful insights that nurture your spiritual awakening and inner peace. Comment below, "I am ready to heal and live in divine harmony." 10. Final liberation. The empath finally understands that the family's narcissistic trap was never a curse. It was a hidden teacher, a painful but sacred mirror, forcing them to awaken from illusion. What once felt like punishment becomes a spiritual initiation, shaping their path toward individuation and higher consciousness. In the quiet, after years of emotional chaos, they begin to see that every manipulation, every act of control, every rejection was the soul's way of saying, "Remember who you are." Through the lens of spirituality and the wisdom of Carl Jung, they discover that the greatest healing is not in changing others, but in reclaiming the self. The empath, once bound by guilt and conditioned to please, learns to love without attachment and to feel without drowning. They rise from the ashes of dependency, embodying what Jung called the integration of opposites, holding both light and shadow in sacred balance. This awakening is not born of hatred or revenge. It blooms from awareness. The empath stops absorbing others' pain and begins to observe it with compassion. They no longer chase validation from those who cannot give it. Instead, they become the source of their own peace. The spiritual awakening that emerges from such darkness is profound, for it transforms suffering into wisdom and boundaries into sacred space. The empath realizes that love without freedom is control, and empathy without discernment is self-abandonment. They begin to understand that spirituality is not about escaping reality, but about seeing it clearly with the eyes of consciousness rather than conditioning. What once kept them imprisoned, the need to fix, to save, to be accepted, now dissolves in the light of truth. They no longer need to prove their goodness because they have become one with it. The narcissistic family, once seen as the villain, now appears as a divine catalyst for awakening. It is through betrayal that the empath learned integrity, through rejection that they found belonging within, and through silence that they heard the voice of their own soul. They stop confusing love with sacrifice and begin to practice a higher form of love, one rooted in truth, not illusion. Jung's concept of individuation becomes their lived reality. They are no longer fragments molded by others' expectations, but whole beings guided by inner wisdom. Their journey shows that the family's dysfunction was never meant to destroy them. It was meant to awaken them to their divine potential. And so, they become living symbols of divine love, loving without bondage, feeling without absorption, and existing in a state of deep presence. Their aura carries the quiet strength of one who is seen through illusion, yet still chooses compassion. They embody the sacred lesson of spiritual awakening, that freedom is not found by changing the world, but by transforming the self. The empath's liberation becomes a message to all who listen, that what once felt like a curse was, in truth, the universe's way of leading you back home to your own soul. When the empath finally awakens to the family narcissism trap, the truth can feel painful, but it's also the beginning of freedom. Remember, awareness is the first step toward reclaiming your energy and rewriting the story of your own worth. You are not here to fix others. You are here to honor your light. If this message resonates with you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos filled with insight and healing.